Hey, everybody. Thanks for starting your weekend with us here at Bookish. We're your virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life produced by the Southern California News Group. And hi, I'm Sam Dunn, the senior editor of premium content here. I want to say thank you to our Reader Rewards subscribers and really to all of you tonight for supporting our programs. Hey, if you are a Reader Reward subscriber, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate to our partner, Once Upon a Time Bookstore in Montrose, which is one of our favorite places to buy books in the Southern California area. And you know what? If you're not a subscriber yet, well, why aren't you a subscriber? Go to scng.com, subscribe to find your local paper. That way you're going to know all the things we've got going on, which are wonderful and plentiful. And if you've missed any of our past programs, go to scng.com/virtual programs and check them out there. Anyway, before we get started tonight, I need to remind you of a couple things. As the audience, you're muted to allow for the free flow of conversation. But if you have questions, and we really hope you do, use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar there. And if you just want to add a comment, use the chat feature also found on your screen. The SCNG Books editor, Eric Peterson, is behind the scenes to help answer all your questions. And if you registered tonight, and of course you did, you're here, duh, a link to the program will be sent to you so you can share or just revisit some of your favorite moments. It's also always posted on scng.com/virtual events. And that's where you can find, as I said, all of our past virtual shows and see what's coming up next. Speaking of coming up next, now joining us from her bohemian splendor in Pasadena is our beloved host. You've heard of her as she's been a regular commentator on NPR's Morning Edition and This American Life and Marketplace, and she also produces the syndicated radio minute, The Lowdown on Science. She's a contributor at The Atlantic and the author of several books, her most recent being The Mad Woman and the Roomba, and she's got more to tell us. Hey, Sandra, hello, welcome.
Hello. I love that you say bohemian splendor because we've been doing this for 2.5 years and I've never fixed my background. It's like, so I'm like throwing stuff over the furniture, but the beautiful thing is I think that we feel like family on the show. And I love that we just did the 10 noteworthy books like 2 weeks ago. And it was such fun. Everyone in the chat, hello. It just feels like family when we do this show.
Yeah, it's become a real community around books, which is something that we hoped when we started, right?
Yes. And thank you for mentioning my play that was on the other screen, and we'll mention it again. It's running late May to June, Mad Women of the West, amazing cast, Caroline Aaron, Mary Lou Henner, Melanie May Run, and Jo Beth Williams. So if you're boomer aged, I am 61. These are some of the icons of the time. And it's like, what if these women woke up in these times and threw a brunch that has somewhat hilariously disastrous circumstances. So,
and we've been to that lunch. Have we not been to that lunch? I think we've been to that lunch. Anyway, I can't wait. Anyway, I will let you to it.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So welcome to Bookish. And first up on today's program, we have the wonderful Kathryn Ma here with the 30-second download. Kathryn Ma is the author of the widely praised novel, The Year She Left Us, named a New York Times Editor's Choice and an NPR Great Read of the Year. Nice doubleheader. Her short story collection, All That Work and Still No Boys, won the Iowa Short Fiction Award and was named a San Francisco Chronicle Notable Book and a Los Angeles Times Discoveries Book. Her short stories, reviews, and essays have appeared in the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, More, Antioch Review, Kenyon Review, Northwest Review, all of them, Prairie Schooner, Slice, Southwest Review, Threepenny Review, Tri-Quarterly, and more. Her new novel, just out, couple weeks out, is The Chinese Groove. Welcome, Kathryn.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Oh, so delightful. Oh, and your book is a sheer delight. I have it here. And it's a wonderful read. It's a hopeful read. It's a funny read. It's sentimental. It's full of sentiment and hilarity, as I say. So if you can talk a little bit about the genesis of this novel and another book of yours, it seemed to come out of like a 1999 trip you took to China. Can you describe the genesis of this idea?
In 1999, I took a trip with my parents and my brother to my father's hometown. He's from a pretty remote area in Southwest China. And when we were there, one of the things that we did was the relatives, my father had many nieces and nephews. still living in his old hometown, the relatives gave us this big homemade banquet. And we were seated under, it was pouring rain, we were seated under the eaves. And there was a gentleman sitting at my parents' table, the table of honor with the older generation. And I noticed this man because he was smiling, he was nodding, he was eating with the others, but no one would speak to him. No one talked to him. And I thought, what is going on here? So later, I asked my dad. He just brushed me off. He didn't really want to say. And so that I asked my mother, and she said, well, he's the son of a concubine wife. And I didn't really understand. I mean, it wasn't clear to me whether that was why the family had shunned him. But I began to think about what would it be like to be in a family, to be in the family, but sort of invisible to the rest. And I decided to give him descendants, to give him a young, to put his story in the mind and the mouth, because he's very talkative.
Yes, he is.
Western nickname Shelley, and go from there. What was it like to be born into the despised branch of the family?
And it's such a great story because Shelley, who it could seem when you describe the dining room scene, it seems like, oh, sad, but Shelley is so buoyant and optimistic, hilariously so. And he comes to San Francisco, which in a way is also like a character in the book. And I know that you're from San Francisco. I mean, can you describe a little bit of what you think about the city of San Francisco, how it functions almost as a character for you?
I think of the city of San Francisco as a character in the book. Well, Shelley has big dreams. He's absolutely convinced that his distant American relatives are going to set him up with a job and housing and a chance to find love. And he comes with just incredibly unrealistically optimistic, and he barges into the life of these very reluctant American hosts. They don't really want anything to do with him. And San Francisco to Shelley is a kind of Shangri-La. He thinks it's going to be a very harmonious place to live, very welcoming. And he finds out rudely that it's a city like any other, with its problems and its failings and its shortcomings. And I've lived in San Francisco for a long time. I love the city, it's my home, but I do see all the ways in which it falls short of our sort of, shining idea of ourselves. And that's one of the things the book does. The book operates on multiple levels. And one of the things it does is look at urban issues, particular to San Francisco, but also I think universal to American cities in general.
Yeah, and I think not everyone may be familiar with the SRO housing, which sounds like standing room only, but it's not. The single resident occupancy housing. So that's so much in San Francisco, and I think there's a lot to learn along the way about this. But again, it's a fantastic read as well.
Well, housing is a big theme of the book because housing is such a challenge for us in many cities. And so when Shelley first arrives and he tries to impose himself on these American relatives, they say, well, you can stay for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, they throw him out. And then he has to find a place to live. And so we see him bounce from place to place. He's trying all these different kinds of housing. And it gave me a chance to put him in different situations and see what he does with his outsized optimism and his practicality. And, he's got a certain savvy. He knows how he's a bit of an operator too.
Which is hilarious. And one of the main ways that he thinks about his operation is, of course, the title of the book, The Chinese Groove, which had me really laughing because he does have a very optimistic take on what the Chinese groove will be that doesn't always land. Can you just tell our viewers who will be reading the book, give a little taste of what the Chinese groove means?
Yeah, it's a phrase that I made up. It's kind of a Shelleyism. He loves language. He's always playing with words and language. And so he thinks of this notion. It's kind of a hope for him. And also it's something of a hazard. He's convinced himself that wherever he goes, there's going to be a helping hand, that other people in the Chinese diaspora are going to be there as a sort of safety net. They're going to help him find his way. And we see him very early on make a mistake about that. He thinks he understands a particular situation on his flight from China to San Francisco. And we as readers are going, uh-oh, this kid has got this all wrong. We should say he's 18 years old. So he's not, he's not a worldly young man, although he aspires to be. So it's both a hope for him. I'm going to have a safety net. I'm going to be able, through these sort of ancestral ties, cultural bonds, I'm not going to be completely on my own, but it's also a hazard because he relies on it and it does get him into trouble.
So, and I wonder if you're in your own personal experience, I think you've talked about this idea of the Chinese group as something that you sensed when it was not explained to you. You just go, there seems to be some kind of code that's passed on that I don't know. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it starts in the family. There in the family, there are things that you learn through your parents by observing them or just by listening to adult conversation that isn't really explained, but it's sort of sensed by a child. And then you build on that, you build on your observations and your interpretation. And then as I went out into the world, I began to feel that sometimes in some situations when I was around other people of my similar Chinese background, that I felt like we were communicating on some, deep level that didn't require words. But it also got me into trouble. I'm thinking of another trip I took to China later than that 99 trip. And when I go to Asia, I just feel like, I just feel different than I do sometimes. And even in San Francisco, pretty heavily Asian American city, I was just striding around and feeling confident and feeling like I got this. I'm seeing people, we really see each other. And then I walked into this public park and there were hundreds of people streaming into this park on a Sunday morning. And when I crossed the threshold of the park, an old lady who's sitting on a bucket, sort of called to me and said, you pay, you have to pay. And I was like, oh, okay, so the Chinese group is not really taking me all the way home here. She could sense, like, you're different, you're wearing you're taller than most of the people here, you're carrying a different kind of handbag, you're wearing a different kind of coat. I see you have to buy an admission ticket. So that's the kind of thing that Shelley gets into trouble like that. He thinks he knows what the situation is, and then he's pulled up short.
So many people who watch Bookish are actually themselves also aspiring writers and interested in writing, even if they're not necessarily published at this moment. And you had such an interesting career shift early on that, can you tell us about, like in Stanford and Berkeley, so can you tell a little bit about that point in your life and making the shift to writing, what you were doing? And
it was a tough question for me. So my parents were both immigrants, and I was born and raised in the United States, and I came, I think, with some of those classic expectations of the children of first generation Americans. I really had to find a very stable career path to give my family the comfort that, all the sacrifices we've made and all the insecurity we face, economic insecurity and cultural insecurity, is going to be solved by the next generation. And I became a lawyer. I went to Berkeley Law School and I practiced law for quite a few years. But I always had in the back of my mind that question, like, could I do it? Because I was that kid who loved to read. I was just always had my nose in a book. And one day I was sitting in the law library in the law firm where I was working, and I was supposed to be working on a brief, and instead I wrote a short story. And that was the first moment. It took me another several years, but that was the first moment where I thought, no, maybe I should try. So eventually I did leave my legal career and began writing. And it's taken me years, to be honest. It's taken me years. I mean, I have published other books, but it's a long road, and it's made me as happy as I could be. I'm glad I gave myself the chance, because I wouldn't have known otherwise. But it was hard to do at a later age, and I'm very grateful that I have so many friends in the literary community where I live that have encouraged me along the way.
Yeah, and we're so grateful for that. And the other piece is, in terms of friends, you're a librarian's daughter. And these are times when libraries are facing this mounting pressure to be other than they are, et cetera, and you're quite passionate about libraries. Can you talk a little bit about your passion for them?
Yeah, I wish my mom were here, that I could ask her about her feelings about what's happening with libraries and librarians right now. So my mom, as I said, emigrated from China. She started out as a scientist. Those were the fields that were open up to a lot of new arrivals. But she also loved books, and she loved to read. She was not a fiction reader. She was a big nonfiction reader. And although she was a chemist, she decided ultimately to go to library school, and she became a science librarian. And one summer when I was a teenager, she collared me and she said, "You're going to come work for me this summer," because she needed some clerical help in her library. And I had a real up close look at what my mother did and how she, the support she gave to all these engineers at her research and development company. And it always just, I don't know, it was just, it deepened my love of what you can find in libraries. And it gave me a whole new perspective on my mom, because I only knew her as the mother in the household. And it was eye-opening to realize, oh, she has a job that has nothing to do with me, which of course is a very rude awakening for any child, whether teenager or even adult. And it was a great education. So she's a big inspiration to me. But both my parents have passed now. So I don't know, maybe in some ways this book too is a kind of love letter, not only to my city and to my country, the United States, but also to my family's history, because my dad is from the area of China that is the home ground of this young man who comes to the United States. And in the book, I look at these issues of what follows us, even when we try to leave and start a new life. What do we bring with us? What is the family history? What is the cultural history that we bring with us? And it's a book, as I said, I tried to have it succeed on multiple levels. It's a funny book, and Shelley is a wonderfully buoyant character, but it's sad too at the core, because when you leave and you separate, there's loss. And both the families in China and in San Francisco, both the families are dealing with grievous loss, and they have to learn how to navigate that. And maybe there's a chance that they'll help each other heal.
No, it's a fantastic book, and I have to say, with some plot twists that had me screaming a lot, like I went, "What?" But it's completely earned. It's just the characters are peeling away like onions. Like, where do you go? So it's a fantastic read, and there are others on the chat, just from Eric Peterson to Samantha Dunn, Dorothy Larson, Kathleen Brady, talking about libraries and COVID, that really are so appreciate you're talking about libraries also, that's very important. So anyway, thank you so much, the great Kathryn Ma. Oh wait, but I want to say, Mary Lamos, Erna Taylor Stark volunteers. Mary Lamos says, "A trained librarian is a powerful search engine with a heart."
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that fantastic? So Kathryn Ma, your fantastic book is The Chinese Groove. Everyone get it, everyone read it. It's absolutely wonderful. And we look forward to your next book also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So inspiring. I love our authors. I love our audience. This is the best little book show in the world. So thank you. All right. Next up, we have Bookish's dear friend, W. Bruce Cameron, here with, if you don't know, because he's been on the show a couple of times, the 30-second download. W. Bruce Cameron began his writing career as a newspaper with a newspaper humor column, 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. It became a New York Times bestselling book and a People's Choice Award-winning television series on ABC with the late, great John Ritter. Teary just thinking about it. But by now, W. Bruce Cameron is best known for his #1 New York Times and USA Today book series, A Dog's Purpose, whose titles include A Dog's Purpose, A Dog's Way Home, A Dog's Journey, The Dog Master, A Dog's Promise, and the puppy tales for young readers. The Dogs of Christmas, The Midnight Plan of Repo Man, and others. So fun fact that we always like to say, the film version, and there have been a couple of different movies, but the film version of A Dog's Purpose has gone on to become the most successful international live action dog movie of all time. Take that, Rin Tin Tin. Welcome, Bruce.
Take that. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yay. It's so great to see you. Okay, so as there are so many that are familiar with your books, although in the press release for this, it said, even if you have never read a W. Bruce Cameron book, you can start with this one. Can you set the stage a little bit for, Love Clancy, which is told from the point of view of
A dog. It's told from the point of view of a dog. That was the way I wrote A Dog's Purpose. That was my first dog book. And people would come up to me and say, now I know exactly how my dog thinks. And I thought, I don't actually think that's true. I didn't set out to write from the mind of a dog, but enough people have said to me, well, you really capture how dogs think. And I thought, well, what would it be like? How could I do that? How could I capture the way dogs think and their goofy, optimistic, happy view of the world? And it just sort of came together for me that it would be A Dog's Diary. So that was the working title for Love Clancy for a long time, A Dog's Diary, because it is Clancy talking directly to us about all the things going on in his world. What he doesn't realize, I think it's the funniest dog book I've ever written. And what Clancy doesn't realize is that the humans that surround him, including the most important one, his person, they're going through a lot. Their pack is basically breaking apart and reforming. He doesn't know what that is. He just knows, number one, he's got to figure out a way to get rid of the cat. And his problem is that strategic thinking is just it's not the forte for yellow Labradors. So he has a real challenge in front of him. He's got to get rid of the pack. He's got to win the affections of the absolutely stunning, beautiful Pyrenees named Phoebe, who Phoebe seems to be more interested in a Shar-Pei, which to Clancy is just unacceptable, because to him a Shar-Pei is just a cat in a dog's body. So the whole thing is this crazy group of people and pack of dogs all getting together, and then at one point they all pile into a van and go to Las Vegas for bizarre reasons, and the trip gets crazy along the way. And there's lots of things that happen. So that part of the book is maybe a road movie, but I think the conversations among the people and the stuff that happens on they're in Kansas, there's a tornado, and anyway, I really enjoyed writing Love Clancy. It's also sort of a love poem to Kansas City, because it's set in Kansas City, go Chiefs, and it just talks about the things that I grew up in Kansas City, so I'm very familiar. It's just a lot different than, say, Los Angeles, and I just wanted to bring out some of the things that are the qualities of Kansas City. People who live in Kansas City are almost like cult members. They think they live in the greatest place in the world, and maybe it is. But certainly in Love Clancy, we get a sense that everybody likes Kansas City.
Well, going back to Clancy as a character, I mean, Clancy is just the way Clancy thinks is very clear. Clancy's both a little bit judgmental, I think, particularly around dogs. Like he if you don't show your feelings as a dog, something's wrong with you. I think that he tends to like the smells he likes may not be the smells the rest of us like, but he's also very forgiving of all of these human characters in a way that's so interesting to read. Because Bruce, reading this book, again, you're going, don't do that. The humans are flawed, can we say? And yeah. You have how do you pull and invent these characters? And you throw things at them? And not to give too much of it away, because I could tell the whole plot because it was such a great read. But are you rooting for your human characters to be so bad but redeem themselves.
You know, there. I mean, I find a couple of the characters more than a little irritating at times. And what I wanted to do was capture what that looks like to a dog who doesn't get irritated, doesn't really recognize idiocy or narcissism or any of the qualities that some of these characters bring to their conversations they have. The person, JB, is the name of Clancy's person. JB's father is essentially a con man and who just happens to have been a participant in the winning of the Powerball. So now he thinks of himself as being a great businessman just because he was in the office pool and bought a ticket. And then Walter is the name of the father, and the crazy schemes he's going through. He seems absolutely determined to spend all of his money on crazy schemes, and there's plenty of people willing to help him do that. But Clancy doesn't know any of that. You know, Clancy just goes through the world as a dog. It was really fun to write these characters and draw very sharp, vivid lines around them, knowing that Clancy, he doesn't know. He can't tell.
But I think in the character of Walter also, I happen to be a weird fan of like Restaurant Impossible. I'm obsessed with restaurants, and just doesn't give anything away in this book. There's a restaurant. It's like opening a restaurant, putting the money into a restaurant. It'll run itself. It's easy. It's the core. So it is. Right. And I think Clancy probably doesn't understand that much about money or how that works.
Right.
But then even I think how you write it, even the character of Walter has some redeeming qualities because he's just hilarious.
Yeah, and I think I really am happy that Walter is in love with JB's mother, even though they've been divorced and she's been married a couple times since. And as far as he's concerned, he can still get her back. He's like that deluded. And then joining him in some of the delusions are, Rodney, the friend who keeps coming up with these wild schemes, like buying a boat full of pig iron that's supposedly sitting there in China. I mean, it's just really crazy stuff. And yeah, you're right. Clancy doesn't know. Clancy likes going to the restaurant. Lots of good smells there. But I made up the fictional title of a book, but it's one that I should write myself, called Never, Ever, Ever, Ever Open a Restaurant Ever.
Well, also with Kansas City and the details, it's just such a pleasure to read your work. You're just there in the converted van, sleeping in the dog pile with people. They play a road game that's like the worst road game ever. but also some of the recipes where I was like reading for this restaurant is like Cajun and Cajun inspired stuff. Like, do you think that would actually fly when you were inventing those dishes, the Cajun inspired dishes? Do you go, this could work, or were you just being hilarious?
No, I know that for my own cooking, no matter what I set out to cook, eventually it turns into a burrito. And so it seemed perfectly okay for me that you'd start cooking lasagna and it would wind up being Cajun lasagna. That's something I would do.
So, I mean, finally, you have such mega success with these books, and people love them. And if people, for instance, haven't ever seen A Dog's Purpose, they really should. Even the trailer, you will be crying the whole time. Like, it's ridiculous how hilarious and warm and human and thoughtful your work is. And you write the movies, adapt the movies with your fantastic wife, Kathryn Ma, also a friend of our show. I mean, has it surprised you, or that it's like you're kind of a life philosopher? Like, these dogs are very wise about seizing the joy in the moment. How did you arrive at that? Does it surprise you that your books are almost spiritual books?
No, because I think of dogs as feeling, sentient, and spiritual animals. I think the part that surprises me is the number of people who feel like, well, you wrote a dog book, that's enough. We only need like one dog book. And I'm like, well, okay, but I just really like writing from a dog's point of view. That Clancy's big problem is that there's a cat, And the other big problem is that he can't get the dog Phoebe to fall in love with him. These are pretty dog-like issues, but they are nonetheless issues. And I think that dogs, they go through the world, they're so full of joy and optimism. Who doesn't want to read a book from that point of view? There's plenty of grim stuff out there. I don't have to dabble in that. The tragedies that I write are things like a dog eating a pepperoni pizza and what happens a couple hours after that. That's the way I write tragedy.
Yeah, and there's horses too, Samantha points out. So in the future, would it be safe to say, so no books from the point of about grizzly bears, as you've seen, like people love dogs more than grizzly bears. Would you ever consider writing a cat book?
So first I want to talk about the grizzly bears, because I did write a book. It's not from the point of view of grizzly bears, but it does have a grizzly bear on the cover. It's called Emery's Gift. It was my second novel that got published. It didn't do as well as A Dog's Purpose, because as you point out, as far as pet ownership goes, grizzly bears are not as popular as golden retrievers.
What?
But we didn't know that. And then when it comes to writing a cat book, I'm writing a cat book right now, and it's the most difficult book I've ever written. It's killing me because cats are just so mysterious to me. And I had a cat, and I loved the cat. The cat didn't like me at all, and I'm like, I don't understand how I could love an animal so much and it would regard me with such disdain. That didn't make I grew up with dogs. This doesn't make any sense to me.
That is fantastic. Well, what inspired you to write the cat book? To try it? Well,
because I go to a lot of schools and I speak to elementary school kids, because I have a whole series of children's books, the Puppy Tales. There are 8 of those. The Lily to the Rescue books, there's also 8 of those. And they're just about dogs, and the kids love them, and that's great. But I always get the question, when are you going to write A Cat's Purpose? And I always say it, well, as soon as I can figure out what the purpose of a cat is.
We're going to get so much mail about this. Oh my God, the cats have no purpose. That is really hilarious. And that is a great service that you're doing for all the children of America, delving into the cat thing. Because but I think even in this book, Phoebe, and not to give away, like, some tolerance of cats among the dogs thing is actually a good thing.
Yeah, Labradors are actually pretty tolerant of cats, generally speaking. And when yet another cat shows up, as far as Clancy is concerned, this is this bewildering development. But the way dogs look at us, we're in charge of everything. I mean, my dog looks to me to decide on everything from what time we're waking up to when is he going to eat to when are we taking a walk. It's all up to the people, and that's how Clancy sees the people in his lives. Is they're in charge of everything, and so if they want to introduce another cat, he thinks it's the worst idea. But oh well, that's what people do.
Can't we all just get along? And Miriam Shalit says cats are 3-year-old narcissists. So, the jury's still out. But anyway, it's always a delight to have you on Bookish. It's wonderful every time. We look forward to having you again for the next book, if not at Christmas, where your dog's Christmas book goes on the bestseller list every year. So thank you again so much. Say hello to Kathryn and also to your dog, Tucker. And thank you so much for being on the program.
It was absolutely my pleasure. That's the book. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Bruce. Thanks again.
Bye.
Hilarious. Oh my goodness. We always great. And the chat is blowing up about cats. Please check that in if you want to talk about Lynn Smith and Jill Schweitzer, and we always love having Bruce on, and yeah, animals. There's a lot to talk about. Okay, last but not least, we have Deepti Kapoor. So let me give you the 30-second download on Deepti. I wrote a little bit differently this time because it seems appropriate. We've done this for 2.5 years. So I would say for those in the publishing world, every so often, all the books we have on the show are fantastic, but a book comes along that makes a huge splash, like a cannonball in a swimming pool, a big publishing splash. This was the case with Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. Age of Vice was the sensation of the 2019 Frankfurt Book Fair. The novel sold instantly in 20 countries with the television rights instantly snapped up by FX. Huge book, bombshell of a book, big global sensation this year. Now, Deepti Kapoor herself was born in Moradabad, Uttar Pradesh, growing up in Bombay, Bahrain, and Dehradun. In 1997, she went to the University of Delhi to study journalism. That gives a little background for what we'll be talking about, later earning an MA in social psychology. Age of Vice is the first book in a trilogy. And Kathryn Zeidenstein says, love Age of Vice so hardcore. Yeah, it's a fantastic read. So we spoke to her early in the week because she actually lives in Lisbon with her husband, which is quite a few hours different. So let's roll the tape of when we talked earlier this week to the great Deepti Kapoor. Welcome, Deepti, and thanks so much for being on Bookish. It's such an exciting novel and time for it. So for those new to your book, this is going to be a slightly longish opening question, but it's going to tee it up. Those new to it, Age of Vice is a big cinematic, multi-generational, page-turning novel. Some call it thriller, which explores themes of extreme rich versus extreme poor, the sometimes bloody conflicts between fathers and sons, the seeds of which grew, I think, for you as a writer out of a particular time and place for you. So if you could give a little backstory for our viewers, if we were to say, Deepti was a 20-something journalist in New Delhi in the aughts, early 2000s. Can you tell us what you were up to and what that time was like?
Yeah, okay. So first, thanks for having me, Sandra. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you. And so, yes, in the early aughts, I'm a early 20-something journalist. I live across the river in a kind of unfashionable part of the city, but I have my father has recently died, so I've spent and my mother is grieving, and she's a widow, so I spend a lot of time outside. My car is sort of my escape. My brother has left the city to work, but has left me his car, which is this great big present, and driving is my escape. I work as a trends correspondent for a news magazine in Delhi, and it's a very open brief. I basically have to go discover social trends in the city. Delhi at the time is witnessing a great big change where the economy is changing from a socialist one to a capitalist one. So there's a lot of movement. This sleepy, sedate city is being transformed into a weird global capital, and I'm right at the center of things. Driving around a lot, smoking cigarettes, talking to loads of people, all from all kinds of characters, high, low, from cops and criminals to party people and dealers and DJs, and at night I have this other life where I have pretty wealthy friends whose wealth is also accelerated at this point of time, their family wealth. So they're partying a lot. They're partying in these big mansions, private mansions. I'm going to these do's late at night. So I'm witnessing that part of the city as well. So that's me in my 20s in Delhi. And that's material I keep mining.
And I think we laugh because we're in LA. The idea of a trends journalist is so where you would describe, you didn't often think highly of yourself as a journalist the way you described it. You go, what are trends? And I think these parties that you describe, which is sort of a locus of where this is, are for viewers in the West, it's like a crazy rich Asians kind of the brand names and the extreme wealth, and in the book there'll be Belgian water, et cetera, and all these brands. But I think that when you're going through these parties, smoking your cigarettes, you would notice something about like not just the wealthy people, but who the servants were. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this is the more the you know, of course there are parties everywhere in the world, you know, rich people, private mansions, all of that is going on. But the interesting thing about India is, of course, there are you know, I mean, rich people have these incredible amount of people at their disposal, and you know, servants, chauffeurs, bodyguards, and they are all these kind of incredibly polite, almost invisible young men working at these parties, watching, listening, making sure that everything, all your needs are taken care of, even sometimes when you are at your most extreme or vulnerable. And you know, I just noticed they were always there. I noticed them, always wondered about them, thought, what do they think about us? What are their lives like? Where do they come from? What have they left behind? Because most of these men have come from villages, all of, you know, different parts of India, also Nepal. So it was, you know, always this curiosity about their lives that, you know, that I wanted to just find a way to write. And that is, of course, went into the character of Ajay.
And I think that you had said you had met at least one young man that was like that character. And you
Yeah,
his
I
story.
was, yeah, so yeah, a few years later, actually, and I changed my life around, started to teach yoga, live in Goa, wasn't a trends correspondent anymore. I was a freelance journalist, and I was traveling in the mountains in the Himalayas, and I met a young boy while staying in a guest house who had a very sad, sweet, not sweet, he was a very sweet boy with a sad story. He'd been sent away by his family to help pay off a debt. He was living alone, and just, you know, full of joy and optimism and hope for the future, which, you know, and he used to have this a little knife that he'd walk around with, his favorite knife, and he was incredible at you know, making rotis. He worked in a farm, and I just, you know, it was just, I remember then I'd always had the Delhi novel in my head, but it was when I met this young boy that the character of Ajay was born, and you know, that's how it all started.
And so we kind of start the novel with him sort of going into this world, and then his foil, there are three basic characters in the novel, all fascinating, and of course his initial foil is Sunny, the character of Sunny. Can you talk a little bit about where that character fits into the world that you describe?
Oh yeah, so Sunny is this wealthy and mysterious only son to the very powerful Banti Vadia, and they've kind of entered Delhi with their power and wealth attached very mysteriously. They've got sort of their hands in every pie in various industries in North India. No one really knows in Delhi where their wealth is from. It's semi-legal, and it seems to and Sunny is using this wealth to become kind of like a patron of the arts. He has a big coterie of friends. He has these grand big parties, and Sunny wants to both, I think, launder his family's reputation, but also do something, build. He wants to do something in the city. He wants to be, his family name to be remembered as people who are builders, not just sort of dirty businessmen. But he also wants to please his father. So he has all these competing ambitions. He's not as ruthless as his father, and that's when we meet Sunny, when, you know, he's kind of like this darling of the scene in Delhi, but he's got secrets. And
I think that the third character coming in, Neda, the journalist, the female journalist, is it's so interesting, and that people will just have to read the book to touch on the surface of the layers of class in India. It's not just the Western idea of the spiritual, which we'll get back to in a moment, but of the class systems. I think you said you'd gone through boarding school with many of these young men who are the scions of these dads. And then, you know, by the 20s, 30s, 40s, they have their own interesting journey but Netta is from the outside looking in, and she's both high class in a certain way, but sort of, I guess, admires and also is horrified into this journey of watching Sonny trying to be something that he's not going to be able to pull off.
Yeah, absolutely. So Netta is the daughter of a sort of culturally elite, intellectual, bohemian kind of parents. They sniff at this sort of new money, like they sniff what's going on, you know, and that's this little kind of I wanted to bring out those class distinctions because it is really the old power is getting eclipsed by this new money, this new coarse, more muscular money that's coming in to India, and Nether, she doesn't, you know, she's curious about it. She's also curious about. She wants the city to transform and change. She wants it to be an exciting place. And even though she thinks, you know, she's doing the right thing, or she's a morally upright person, she gets lured by Sonny's charm and sort of just the glamour of his life, and off she goes.
And to a certain extent, I mean, his optimism, and I love the class things that she gets to drive a horrible car because her address is unbelievable. So that the way her class is different than the new money, but she's also seemed to be swept up by his optimism of wanting to transform New Delhi into a Paris or a London. Can you talk a little bit about the mechanics of that, what he's trying?
Yeah, so Delhi, of course, we have this city, you know, which is on the banks of the river Yamuna. The Yamuna is this kind of like on the banks of the Yamuna are slum settlements where migrants from all over India are coming in, pouring in. They live there, they work there, they work for the rich people and the middle class residents. But also there's a narrative at that point of time in India, in Delhi, that we can clean the riverbanks, we can, you know, make it like Paris or Vienna. We can have you know, glittering restaurants, art galleries, have an amazing riverfront, an amazing city, and then it gets caught up in that moment. And as I was as well, because there was at that point of time a kind of like neoliberal media narrative, and it was being pushed through the papers and through judicial activism that, you know, we just need to resettle these people and everything, and the people who serve us, they're invisible, they're very needed, but they should be invisible and just kept away somewhere. And then we're going to have this great glittering city, and that is part of that. She believes in Sonny's in his optimism and his plans to transform the city, even though as a journalist she's been cautioned by her colleague Dean, you know, look closely, see what it's really about. And but you know, she's young and a little bit foolish and curious, I'd say.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I think looking at the lens of Westerners, looking at this book of like, India is such a complex country with such a history that is so fascinating. And I think that you'd mentioned like the liquor industry gets to be unregulated because Gandhi, you can blame it on Gandhi, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because Gandhi had his own abstinences and his own stuff to deal with, and he basically projected it onto India at the time of independence. Like so we have that that India will try at some point of time to be an alcohol-free country, and that's so being a liquor businessman, being involved in the liquor business was always sniffed at. You know, it was always something that good, God-fearing middle-class people never went into, you know, like it was something my family wouldn't, and they were basically, you know, professionals, doctors, accountants, bureaucrats. They would never dream of getting into the liquor business, and there was so much money to be made. That's the thing. So it's really interesting that we have this relationship. Delhi as well is a city that is awash in whiskey, in scotch. You know, they love drinking there. It's the only place where when I fly to Delhi, I'm seeing my fellow Indians at the duty free in the various cities, wherever I'm flying from. They're there in the duty free, in, you know, whether it's in Germany or wherever. And then we get off in Delhi, and then they're scouring the duty free in Delhi to make sure that they can take their Johnny Walker or Scotch or whatever.
Or Paul Roger champagne. Yeah, it's
Oh,
serious.
right.
There's more drinking in this book than any book, Irish or any, that it's hilarious.
I know, but it is a reflection of the city, you know, everyone, and it's not just say the high class, you know, everyone drinks. Unfortunately, you know, it's a way of escaping oblivion, everything. Yeah, it makes me want to drink as well. I land in Delhi, and the first thing I think is like, I need a drink.
Right, and smoking, as people will find, they have to do that while reading this book. So you are, and we're almost, the time is flowing. I wish we had an hour, but you have a lot of book projects now. This is the first of a trilogy. You're also writing it with your partner as a series for FX, but there are many also aspiring writers who watch our show. And when a book comes like yours, it's an international sensation right away. But it's not like an overnight success. I mean, you had a couple of other book projects that you're working on. The ideas sound amazing. So if you could tell us about those two other novels that just, I described the plot to Samantha, you go, we're going to buy those. So if you could say about those.
Oh, yeah. One is actually, because I worked as a yoga teacher in Goa and I had a lot of interaction with, you know, Westerners, white people who came, and it's actually a yoga satire structured around Hermann Hesse's Siddharth, which is the journey of a young German who's born in post-World War Germany, and he comes to India in the 70s, you know, overland on the hippie circuit, and then eventually becomes this big guru, yoga guru, and then what happens? I mean, it's a satire, so you know, there is a lot of interesting stuff going on with how foreigners are in India, how they view spirituality, how they view India, and ultimately all his dreams and desires are undone by a Californian woman who becomes his wife, another yoga teacher, and basically chaos ensues. And that was something, it's written, it's in a drawer, and I hope to publish it after the Age of Vice trilogy is done.
Yes, and you will hopefully will be one of the first shows that you're on, because I think it's such an amazing journey. I think the Western lens of how Westerns think about it, what it actually is. I think Gandhi drinking whiskey, like it's like, this is good opening for people to know. The book is fantastic, you know, and we hope that when your yoga books come out and the trilogy, that you'll be on our show again. Because
I would absolutely love to. I mean, this has been so much fun. I can't believe it's almost over, but thank you, Sandra.
Okay, come back, Deepti. Thank you. Thank you. I love her so much.
I love her so much. I cannot wait for this other book. I'm sold. I'm sold already. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank
Great
you.
night tonight. Well, thank you. I mean, we had fun. This was good, you guys. Thanks.
Yes.
And Bruce and Deepti and Kathryn, my gosh, thank you. And thanks to our production manager, as always, the Oz behind the curtain, Julie Corlett. And hey, everybody, before you leave, don't forget copies of the books by tonight's authors are available at Once Upon a Time bookstore or wherever you get your books, hopefully an independent bookstore. We'll be back next month with another fantastic show. But again, you don't have to wait that long for great content. Our books editor, Eric Peterson, is here. He's going to tell us what we've got coming up in the newspapers. Eric, are you there? Eric?
I am. Can you see me?
Hey, I can. Okay. What's up?
So much. I will be fast. First, I just want to show, which you probably can't see, I just got my cellar door bookstore t-shirt that I ordered. Read up on what's going on there, and it's a great bookstore. I'm glad to support it. In the book pages this week that went up today, I put a link in the chat. I talk about this book and what I found inside, and it made at least one person in my household cry.
And let me just say, I'm just going to interrupt you. I never interrupt you, but I loved this week's book pages. So you guys, you have to sign up and you have to read it. It was really great. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Thank you. No. And then I will just say then we've got some great stuff this weekend. You can read some of these already online. We've got a review, or not a review, an interview with Rebecca Mackay that's going to be online, I think Monday morning, but it'll also be in the paper on Sunday, so you can see it. We've got some great interviews with some more authors, and I would definitely, you can find these online. Just a lot of good stuff, and I love being here, and thanks everybody. I didn't write anything down.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. Read on. All right. And everybody, if you've got thoughts from today, or if you have suggestions or just have additional questions or whatever, email us at events@scng.com. Thanks again. Hope to see you next time, and take care until then. Bye.